On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Rochester metropolitan area, good evening. I'm Mary Hugson-Callan, and I'd like to welcome you to this candidate forum focusing on programs and policies that improve family health and self-sufficiency between the candidates for New York State Assembly District 136 in the Democratic primary of Thursday, September 13th. Do not trust the Democratic Chronicle on this one. The League is pleased to join with the Children's Agenda to co-sponsor this debate on what would seem to be a very patriotic way to commemorate 9/11. The League is nonpartisan. We believe that informed voters are the backbone of our democracy. We register citizens to vote, and if in fact you happen not to be registered, or if you've moved since you last registered, please stop at our table in the entryway. We study issues of public interest, we share our findings publicly, and we advocate for policy change. We also sponsor public forums such as this debate. For additional information after this debate is over, we encourage you to visit our electronic voter guide at www.votingnewyork, that's votingnewyork.org. Our co-sponsor, the Children's Agenda, is a nonpartisan, Rochester-based organization that advocates for effective policies and drives evidence-based funding, system building, and policy change solutions for the health, education, and success of children. They're especially committed to children who are vulnerable because of poverty, racism, health disparities, and trauma. TCA promotes voter and candidate engagement and education on critical challenges facing children and families. We especially welcome our additional help from the Junior League tonight. And we request that all our guests respect our panel, our hosts here at the Mount Olivet Baptist Church, and of course, our own commitment to civil and respectful discourse. Our distinguished moderator this evening is Shirley Thompson. She's previously served on the Rochester City School District Board of Education for 8 years and is a 45-year resident of the city. Without further ado, please welcome Shirley and let's begin.
Very much, Mary, and thank you to the Children's Agenda and the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum, and thank you to Mount Olivet Baptist Church for hosting it. We have about an hour to cover a lot of ground, so we're going to be moving quickly. Before we begin, there are a couple of housekeeping items. If you haven't already done so, please turn your cell phones off now. And if you go out into the lobby, you can find the gentleman in the yellow vest and he will direct you if you need to use a bathroom. If there is the need to have an emergency evacuation, we'll leave the way we came in, straight out through the lobby, make a left, and you'll be home free. And just a reminder, there are no recordings, please. The League will be recording this, and both the League and the Children's Agenda will make this forum taping available on their websites. Now I'd like to thank two of the candidates for the 136th Assembly District seat for being here this evening. Todd Brady's on the right, Jamie Romeo's on the left. Jacqueline Richard, I want to say Richard, is unable to be present because of her observance of Rosh Hashanah. Now some questions have been prepared by the League of Women Voters and Children's Agenda. They cover a range of issues related to family and community health and self-sufficiency, and will be directed to both candidates. The audience may submit questions in writing. There are no cards and pens that have been made available to you. And the questions from the audience will be screened by the League and the Children's Agenda to avoid duplication and to ensure relevance. The candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer a question. We have signs that are going to be held up. We have a green sign. We'll let them know when they have 30 seconds, a yellow sign when they're down to 15 seconds, and a big red sign when they have to stop. The candidates will not be allowed to question each other. In the spirit of fairness, the time limits will be strictly enforced. even if it means I have to interrupt you mid-sentence. It's not meant out of disrespect, but just to ensure that you have equal time. To begin, the candidates will each give 1-minute opening remarks. After their remarks, we'll alternate who responds to a question first. After the audience questions, each candidate will give a 1-minute closing statement, and then we'll have closing remarks by the children's agenda. They drew numbers earlier, and Ms. Romeo will begin with her opening remarks.
Thank you for being our great host. Thank you to the church, the children's agenda, the League of Women Voters, and also all of you here tonight. Also to our friends observing the Jewish faith on behalf of Rosh Hashanah New Year. It's an honor to be here tonight to talk to you about the important issues that all New Yorkers face, but particularly those in the 136th district. My name is Jeannie Rova. I'm obviously one of those candidates. And I'm running for office this year because after spending 14 years working in the background, sitting in the back room quietly taking notes, or prepping other legislators and helping work on behalf of other people's voices and visions, I really felt it was time to step up and add my own voice to the decision-making that's happening in state government. I'm very happy that all of us are here. We'll have these important conversations on the issues, but I will kind of end it off there, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Mr. Grady.
Thank you to everyone for attending tonight, and our sponsors as well, and happy Rosh Hashanah as well to our Jewish community. This is a very important race. As you know, Mr. Marley has been in office for 27 years. I'm a former resident of Aranyakoi for 16 years, and now live in the city, in the Browncroft neighborhood, where we have many issues on our borders of our city that we'll be talking about tonight, I'm sure, and answering many of your questions. The reason I'm in the race is because I have observed what's been going on in Albany from the front row seat in many various capacities in our community, formerly as a Democratic Chronicle staff writer on the business beat, and more recently in economic development on a lot of many key projects in our community that have created jobs, and I'm currently working new home construction. So if anyone understands the power of labor and the importance of economic development, it's in the new home construction, because we create lots of jobs. And I think jobs are the #1 thing that get us out of poverty in our city. And we'll talk again about that today as well. Thank you again for being here and paying attention to this race.
Thank you both. I'm going to ask the candidates to please make sure you speak directly into your microphones.
Okay.
It's a large room. Thank you. All right, the first question has to do with trauma. Studies show that childhood trauma has lifelong effects on an individual's mental and physical health. In the Rochester area, too many children grow up in under-resourced families, violent neighborhoods, and in communities heavily impacted by substance abuse. 2/3 of Monroe County high schoolers, that's about 67 out of every 100 students, 2/3 report that they have had adverse experiences that research has shown increase their risk of poor life outcomes. The question is, if elected, how will you work to improve the health and well-being of children and families in the Rochester area? Mr. Grady, you'll begin, please, and you each will have 1.5 minutes to respond.
As I was stating earlier, I mentioned the poverty being one of the top issues on my agenda, again, given the climate of our city school system, the challenges faced at home. My wife's an educator of more than 20 years, and it's very much on top of the agenda, not only in the city, but in the suburbs as well. I think that we need to bring more funding into our community for these, provide resources for our school district, both in the city and our suburban schools to face these challenges. For far too long, many of you may know this because it's been talked about for so long, Rochester has gotten shortchanged when it comes to equitable state funding. Syracuse and Buffalo get much more per capita, and I think that you'll hear our mayor talk about this as well. We need to increase the number of resources so we can pay our educators, our counselors, the people who are facing these situations on a day-to-day basis, dealing with our young people. We need to help them and help to support the families that are faced with these crises on a daily basis. Rochester deserves much better than what we're showing right now. Our community has a wealth of resources. We have an extremely wealthy population, in part our city and our suburbs. And I think we need to share more resources and bring more money to the table to affect change.
Thank you. The same question for Ms. Romeo. Are you able to hear okay, everyone?
No.
No.
If they can hold their microphones right up to their, like they're eating an ice cream cone.
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll use our figure-own voices. I actually, this is one of the areas I think that Mr. Green and I agree on, that the state does need to up its AIM resources funding. That it's been way too long that the state has not increased the aid to municipalities funding that the city of Rochester sees. But particularly in regards to trauma and a lot of the issues that our children are facing, particularly children that do reside within the city of Rochester going to the public school system, I do think when we're looking at how we're spending those education dollars, we do need to look at the community schools approach. There's a lot of other school becomes a focal point in a lot of young people's and students' lives, and it can be such a resource to families to provide assistance. And there's other services that we can try to introduce when a school is trying to address a child's needs and making sure that not only can they learn, but do they have the other resources that they need in order to learn, in order to grow. And I think one of the things that we should look at if we're looking at trying to build on a community school approach is not just providing resources perhaps for the child, but maybe for the parents as well. Maybe the parents are going through some issues themselves where if you're talking to people within the district, we could even just have some referral services that if we know that they're also in need of help, maybe the school district or the community schools could try to provide that connection to them. So that information really is power, and the more that we can do to help connect families with the resources that they need and the services in our community. We have a lot of great service agencies. I think that's an important step we should also look at as well.
Thank you. Our second question is about institutional racism. Racism is prevalent throughout the systems that touch the lives of the most vulnerable children and families. For example, juvenile justice, foster care, public assistance, and the Child Protective Services system. We now know that childbirth is more dangerous for mothers and babies of color. Rates of maternal and infant death are higher for Black women in the United States regardless of income or educational background. If elected, what would you do to work towards elimination of institutional racism in state agencies and state-funded programs? We'll begin with Ms. Romeo.
And this is such an important issue that there won't be one simple thing that we can do. It's really going to take a multifaceted approach. But one of the things when we're talking about trying to change the culture and change people's perceptions, we have to be able to engage and facilitate dialogues. And sometimes, particularly with our healthcare professionals, that may be a need for training, a need for resources to be able to have these type of trainings so that, so that we can make sure that we're advancing these conversations in a constructive way where we're trying to help these healthcare professionals to realize some of the implicit bias that they may have. But I think that's got to reach beyond just some of the healthcare that we have, but also when we particularly talk about the criminal justice systems. A lot of the changes that we want to see in our criminal justice system won't happen until we start providing more resources for the officers who oftentimes are the first people that encounter anyone entering the criminal justice system, and to make sure that we're giving them those same type of training opportunities where we can really challenge the way we've been doing things and the way we've thought about things. We can't try to change our culture if we're not kind of forcing a lot of these conversations, particularly within our state institutions. The state should lead by example and make sure all of our workers are taking that on, but then being able to provide the resources and the programs to make sure that smaller municipal departments, other departments, private agencies are able to follow the state's lead on that as well.
Thank you. Mr. Grady?
I think we need to get into our neighborhoods, and I think we need to communicate. Not only, we need to bring people from the suburbs together with people from the city in all facets of life, whether it be education, whether it be economic development, whether it be our community groups that act as individual neighborhoods associations. I think we all need to come together and present and put the issues on the table that are facing, including what you're saying, institutional racism. We need to bring people together, and we can't operate in silos. I think too long, again, it's been something that's been going on in our city that we tend to live in our own little communities, and we're not coming together as one and bringing face-to-face and facing the problems that we do have head-on. And also, we have to lead as a state and bring attention to our work with the county and our local municipalities as well as governments. I think we have a big place, a big pocketbook in a lot of these situations, and I think we can bring more funding to battle these institutional problems that we have had for so long. Rochester, again, we deserve better in a lot of ways. We are a very educated community, and I think, again, we operate in silos and we need to bring people together.
I'll just offer one more reminder. I moderated a forum last night, and the candidates said they felt like they were pushing the microphone down their throats. But we really want everyone to hear what you have to say, because these folks who are going to be going to the polls, they're going to be talking with their family and friends about what you say tonight, so we want them to hear what you have to say. So
Okay.
please make sure you hold the mic close.
Okay.
All right, foundation aid is our next topic. Despite a court ruling that mandated increased foundation aid for New York schools to make up for years of inadequate funding, New York State continues to ignore this ruling by providing less aid than is required. Two questions, and we'll start with Mr. Grady. Do you support full funding of foundation aid? And do you support an update of the foundation aid formula to account for changes in the concentration of poverty in New York school districts?
Absolutely. I do support increasing foundation aid. Again, it's been on the agenda for too long. I don't think we're fighting hard enough on a lot of these issues, and I think we need to bring them to the table and call out people for not giving us what we deserve. Our schools are the #1 priority, again, for battling poverty. Our schools deserve everything they get and more. Again, I mentioned my wife being a school teacher, my whole family are educators. And I know the challenges every day, that whether it's in the city, whether it's in the suburbs, we need and deserve our full funding. And I will fight for that funding to the end degree until it gets back to where it should be, based on what the law states. The law is the law, and then the governor needs to hear this message as well.
Thank you. Ms. Romeo.
Again, I think this is another area where we both agree, and I think that we have to make sure that we don't just stop when we talk about foundation aid and making sure we get back up to where the court says we need to be with the aid that has been well-deserved and earned by our school districts. But we need to make sure that at the end of the day, every child needs to be able to have access to a high-quality education regardless of where they live and regardless of what zip code they live in. And it's still very difficult. We know that money is not necessarily going to be the only solution. We're going to have to make sure that we have funding and that we're working with our schools if they need extra assistance on trying to provide how to make sure that every child has access to a high-quality education regardless of where they live. So I think that we should be able to hopefully have a new Democratic majority in the state Senate that will be able to work with to help make sure we're getting filling the gap foundation aid, but making sure that we're not forgetting that the cost of everything, the cost of living is going to continue to increase, the cost of education is going to continue to increase. And we've got to make sure we're making some long-term plans on how we're going to financially meet those goals, because we're playing catch-up right now in New York State when it comes to education funding.
Thank you. We're going to move on to child care affordability. The cost of child care in New York rivals mortgage payments. New York State ranks among the most expensive states for child care in the nation, with the average cost for a full-time, center-based care at $15,000 a year for an infant. Approximately 8,000 children in Monroe County are eligible for a child care subsidy, but are unserved. Statewide, fewer than 20% of the families eligible for child care subsidies receive them. So that's less than 20 families out of every 100 families that are eligible for child care subsidies receive them. If elected, what policy or funding changes would you pursue to assist families in meeting the high cost of child care? And Ms. Romeo, would you begin?
Thank you. And as a mother of a first grade right now, I know very well firsthand the realities of the high cost of child care. I worked for the Monroe County Legislature staffer the 2 times that the county reduced the eligibility rate, which we've never fully restored. And I definitely remember working so many years, a very long time ago, well over 10 years ago, when we were fighting against these cuts, and the impacts that they've had, and now we've let them languish, and they've grown into this insurmountable problem. I think that one of the things the state needs to do is to stop looking at this issue that it's going to be fixed with a tweak in the block care grant program or funding. I think that it needs to be a much more comprehensive look. I was glad to see that the governor signed a task force bill to create a bill last year. I'm not sure how much progress that task force has made, because I really do think we're going to have to change our perspective on how we talk and look at child care. I think that we need to look at some abilities to work with more public-private partnerships, maybe working with employers, perhaps even working with the ability of making sure that we're providing the training and the resources that people can become eligible to be very good providers in our community. Because we know that there's families that need this service, and perhaps we can try to do more, not just to employ people, but to provide more providers for those families, more eligibility. So that's a very complicated question that I think through the course of this campaign, I really
Thank you.
want to work on that.
Thank you. Mr. Grady.
Following up with what Jamie said, this has been obviously an important issue to her and her family. I think it comes down to simplicity. I think we need a mandate. I think we need a mandate that this needs to be funded, and funded to the highest level to meet the needs of our families and our community. We need to find a way to pay for it. It's of utmost importance because of the need of the families. Like you said, it could be a mortgage payment for a lot of families. And I just think that we need to set aside a certain amount of our budget, make it a mandate for our county, that this needs to be provided. It needs to be provided at an adequate level. And I'll call it a mandate. We have other mandates in our budget, and I think this needs to be one.
Speaking of childcare, first let me say, if anyone, feel free to use body language to ask the candidates to hold the mic closer. I think they'd appreciate it if they know they're not being heard. So speaking of childcare, there's also the issue of childcare provider wages. Many of the childcare educators caring for New York's youngest are paid wages that leave them living at or near poverty. The average median wage for a childcare educator in New York is $12.38 an hour, or $25,760 per year. Low compensation in the field causes high turnover rates, in turn causing instability for young children who need consistency in caregivers to establish healthy and secure attachments. If elected, what actions would you take to address child care workforce needs? And this question is going first to Mr. Brady.
Do I dare say that we should look to the private sector to help fund us with some of these costs that we incur? I'm very well versed in fundraising, and I think that we have the potential to potentially create endowments, which would spin off every year a certain amount of money to meet the budgeted needs of paying people what they deserve. You know how hard our social service workers have been fighting in Monroe County for adequate pay for far too long again. And the people that do these certain jobs are not well paid, as you just mentioned, and they deserve more. So I would suggest that somehow we look at creating some type of investment, money that can be put into a fund essentially that would spin off enough money to boost the pay adequately and with reasonable amount. We can't jump from $12 to $25, but I'm just saying to give people better paying wages that they can raise a family on. So we need to address, again, it's another situation we need to address.
Ms. Romeo.
There unfortunately remain a number of service providers, whether it's home health aides or child care providers, that are being paid not enough for the work that they're doing, and particularly for child care providers when they're caring for children at very young ages. Those are some very critical years. And I think that this is another area where we have to kind of relook at how we're classifying these workers. I know when we were able to raise the minimum wage a few years ago for New York State, we did still have some carve-outs for other employees. We're trying to work to change that so we don't have the carve-out where people are getting paid less for equal work or the same amount of work. But I do think part of what we can try to help promote with child care providers is being able to organize amongst themselves. potentially have a collective voice, because as we know, when people can come together and speak together, they can have a much stronger seat at a bargaining table. And I think that that's something, you know, we've seen different efforts to organize other provider services as well. I think that's one that I would hope providers themselves are looking to as well. But this is part of how we have to kind of change that paradigm shift of how we're viewing child care providers, home health providers, and the work that they're doing, and that these are not minimum wage jobs. These are vital services that they're providing that affect the well-being of our children and sometimes our seniors in other areas. And I think that that's going to take a very strong handle of a lot of conversation that we're going to have to really force in a way.
Thank you both. The next question is about childcare as an economic development issue. The shortage of quality, affordable childcare hurts New York State's and the Rochester area's businesses and its economy. The lack of access to affordable, quality childcare causes businesses to suffer decreased productivity as a result of employee absenteeism and higher rates of turnover. The business case for investing in childcare is so compelling that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation recently called upon business leaders to champion investment in a 2017 report. If elected, how would you engage businesses to help address the shortage of quality, affordable childcare? Ms. Romina?
Thank you. I think one of the ways we'll be able to do this in New York State is looking to the model that we're building and testing to a certain extent with the paid family leave program that we're looking to implement, that we want employers to be a contributing part of, where that's a vital service that we need to have paid family leave for not just expecting parents, but also family members of any time that need to be able to take time off of work. We have these structures in place that we're piloting to have individuals as well as employers paying into the same system to provide that collective good, which childcare is that collective good that we need to have for families. And I think that the state could certainly look at trying to develop a similar type model that we're seeing with the paid family leave program being implemented right now across the state. And my hope would be that we can learn from that, and then hopefully we'll be able to have a new proposal that either expands that same program or tries to mimic it.
Mr. Brady?
I would say that a lot of companies in the Rochester area do provide child care services, to credit to them. And for those who are not really on the program yet, encourage them to get with it. We can provide an incentive, some kind of tax incentive to promote child care services, businesses providing for their employees, so that it's not a stress, it's not a financial burden on employees that are employed at companies. I think the tax incentive would be a good way to go about this.
Thank you. It's a real bonus when you don't take your full minute and a half. I hope that answering these questions is keeping me warm because I am cold. Anybody else? I'm okay. This is my husband here. I'm okay though. Okay, moving on to access to quality after-school care and summer learning programs. A 2015 report released by the Children's Agenda found that only a third of Rochester students, that's 33 out of every 100 students, had access to quality after-school programming. National research, as well as our local United Way's data, show that children who engage regularly in an after-school program are more likely to attend school and get higher grades. Summer learning programs also contribute to academic success by preventing learning loss over the summer months. If elected, what would you do to bring more state resources to our area for high-quality, out-of-school time programs? And this question goes to Mr. Brady first.
If elected, I would provide the idea of having more mentoring. I would bring in volunteers from our community, people who would share in the same ideals to provide good after-school care for our community. I think whether it's athletics or any other type of programs that children might be interested in, I think that would be a good way of providing more resources to provide the funding, or actually the programs that we need. With regard to sports is another way that a lot of people and children participate and learn a lot of life skills through, or whether it's educational platforms as well. I just think that we need to have more community participation, and I would also encourage our business community to look at this as well in any way that they can help out. So again, I think it's partnering with community and bringing people together and calling attention to these issues.
Thank you. Ms. Rowan?
Well, I can certainly say that having, as we're going into a new school year coming off summer, for parents, summer can be expensive. Just trying to find camps or quality programming for your kids to go to, it can be very expensive. And I think that when I talk about trying to change the perspective of childcare, I think that we need to have a more holistic view, because these programs are being siloed off as something separate, where in fact, it's still a form of childcare. What are these children doing that's safe and constructive for the time that they're away from their parents? And I think that that's part of them. Perhaps if we start as a policy trying to wrap some of these things together, we won't be constantly fighting several battles on the same front when we're all trying to achieve the same thing. Not that we're going to see the block grant program shift overnight, but I think that when we look at broader policy that we can do, instead of just trying to nickel and dime and say we want to get so much for this aftercare program and the summer care program, we need to try to change that narrative that this, in effect, it's all a different form of child care. How can we try to create this more holistic view of funding and providing some programs or training for these things so that it becomes more effective and efficient when we're looking at it throughout the whole year, not just for after school or a particular age or a particular season.
Okay. We're going to move to the raise the age issue. Until recently, New York State was one of only 2 states in the nation that treated 16 and 17-year-old youth as adults in the criminal justice system, despite data showing that this results in higher recidivism rates. In 2017, New York State approved a raise the age policy that shifts 16 and 17-year-olds to the juvenile justice system. This change will take effect starting next month. While this will be better for the youth and for community safety, raise the age will require more funding for specialized detention beds and more alternative to detention, probation, and diversion services. Governor Cuomo committed to 100% state reimbursement for county expenditures related to raise the age. Another 2-part question. If elected, will you continue state funding for raise the age services and age-appropriate detention facilities? Also, what else will you do to keep youth out of prison and disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline? Ms. Rubio.
I unfortunately was working for the county as a staffer in the legislature when we had several budgets come through that cut important ATI programs, including SWAN, reduced money to pretrial services and other things. So while I do think it's important, yes, the state needs to fund that 100% and make sure we're providing 100% of the reimbursable funding, I think it's going to be important that we're not just sending that money to municipalities and then assuming that they're doing the right thing with it, particularly when sometimes we send this money to local governments and they still through their own local governing budget processes, change how that money is getting spent, or change eligibility rates, or change the intent of what that money was supposed to do. I think that Monroe County, unfortunately, has not met their commitments that they need to make regarding fundings for a lot of these pretrial services for the entire criminal justice system, and now we're going to see a much bigger burden placed on a lot of our programs with you raise the age. We are getting another judge in family court, which is important, but we need to make sure that the funding is there, but we also need to make sure that the money is going where it needs to go and that the county is restoring some of these contracts, is putting more money into pretrial services. And unfortunately, those are county-level decisions, and I do think it's going to be important that the state is having that conversation with the county to make sure that we're providing the resources, they're doing what they need to do.
Thank you. Mr. Grady.
Yes, I would support the raise the age funding and continue to support it. I also believe our county, and not to sit here and bash the county, but I think the county has made way too many cuts to important social services programs. it's just an ongoing problem, it's an ongoing battle that we face with our county. And obviously we have two Democrats sitting up here. The county is controlled by the Republicans. So the fight is tough, I understand, but you have two people sitting at this table that will fight until the end, as I said, on another issue. I think we have to raise our voices. We have to, just as you're outlining the issues for us tonight, I think we need to take them head on. I think the second part of the question was what can we do to create a better atmosphere and help people out of situations that they find themselves in and get them out of the juvenile system, and that is bringing in mentoring programs and creating centers of youth. I know that already exists, but I think we need more, and I think we need more in our neighborhoods, and I think we need more volunteer staffing. I think if we really need to look at this with the help of community, and especially the business community, there's many resources that are available. Whiteman's, what they do with the Hillside program is fantastic, and I think we need more programs such as that to help bring this to a better conclusion.
Thank you, Bill. Early developmental services. Research shows that early supports for babies, toddlers, and preschoolers with developmental delays or disabilities can be a game changer for many children. But state reimbursement rates paid to providers like physical and occupational therapists who work with young children are inadequate. Some rates have even been cut in recent years. Because of these low reimbursement rates, many programs are closing and providers are leaving the field, making it difficult for children to get services in a timely manner when they can have the greatest impact. Almost a third of children, 33 out of every 100, in New York State in 2016 had to wait at least 30 days for services to begin. So another two-part question. If elected, 1, would you commit to increasing the reimbursement rates for early developmental services so that more children can reach their full potential and enter school ready to succeed? And 2, do you support a shift toward a more state-driven system that would ensure greater continuity of care for children and simplify access to the system for families? And I believe you finished last, Mr. Grady, so you'll go first.
Yes, thank you. I would definitely increase the amount of money being funded to these programs. We know we're talking about a lot of increases, but we're also talking about the biggest issues that face our community, and are certainly creating poverty and instability within our households and within our schools. So I would ask the state to step up and bring this away. If the county, I believe, is what you're saying again, and bring it to the state level. That's what we need to do. Again, it goes back to the mandate word. I believe that we need to create a mandate for these particular areas that we're facing, and it's part of a budget process. And every year we have allocated money for this reimbursements, and the money's there in the budget every year. We don't have to go looking for it, and it's raised to a certain level that is basically flush with what the need is.
Ms. Romeo.
I would absolutely commit to trying to fight for increasing that reimbursement rate for providers. And I do think the second part of your question is really the key thing, not just with this program, but with a lot of other programs, because whether we're talking about early intervention services or childcare or a number of things, right now, the decentralized way that our system works about going down to the county level and then putting the burden of implementing these programs and then making the decisions on how to implement these programs at the counties is clearly not been working. Because not only do we have service gaps in individual communities, it's across the entire state. These are issues that every family faces, regardless of what county they live in, what city they live in. And it makes sense for the state to step in and try to have a more centralized approach to these programs, because it's been very clear that the pushing it down to the lower level of government has not been working. And that we need to do more to make sure that people have access to these services, and that's a simple role that the state should, and I believe more certainly, step in and take back.
Thank you. We're coming to the last two questions, so if you think you want to ask a question, now's the time to jot it down because the cards will be collected.
Does anybody need a card? Didn't get one?
All right, we want to talk a moment about home visits. Parent education and support programs like Monroe County's Nurse Family Partnership provide valuable education and assistance to parents and young children. These regular home visits have been shown to improve health and school readiness, reduce child abuse and neglect, and improve the economic stability of families. Given this success, what would you do to ensure that these voluntary evidence-based programs are available to all families who are eligible for them? Ms. Roby?
As someone that's worked in the Monroe County Legislature staff and then also in the state senate, I was always very proud to work on behalf of elected officials that were fighting for maintaining and not trying to increase funding for these programs. And I think the next state assembly person in this district will equally fight and pledge to fight for these as well. But the one thing I will add to this as well is that we need not just the elected officials, because we've been fighting for years a lot of these same fights to increase funding, to increase awareness, to make sure the state is holding its commitments, but we need to make sure that more people who are in the audience of this forum are also talking to their county government and their state government to say, oftentimes these programs that are being cut, when we look at what the county of Monroe particularly has cut over the few years, they're targeting the most vulnerable populations because they know when it comes down to politics, oftentimes those are not the populations that are standing at the forefront and are willing to fight back or are saying, hey, we need to have our voices heard. And we need to make sure we're standing up with them. And I think that while we're definitely here to commit to fighting for these at the state level, it's really important that I'm so excited the past few years to see how much more civic engagement we're seeing in our community. And I think that we just really need to continue that because we can only do so much as lawmakers of the body. It's really the public, and we saw this with the healthcare fight earlier this year. A Republican Congress did not push through a healthcare bill because they heard from the constituents and they heard from the people. And the more that we use that collective voice, we'll be able to better support nurse-family partnership, child care, early intervention. There's a lot of these programs that I think you will see your elected officials make the same commitments, and the question is, well, what's going to be different than the previous elected officials who have these seats? I think the difference has to be that we continue to work together and amplify the public's voice and make sure we're encouraging everybody to have that conversation too, because that's going to be what pushes Albany over the edge to start acting more, I'm blanking on the word, I apologize, but acting more assertively.
Thank you. Mr. Grady.
I think as elected leaders that we need to do a better job of communicating with our constituents. Being at the door of homes throughout this campaign, I don't think there's enough education or enough understanding of how government works and what services are available to constituents, whether it's social services, economic development, business incentives for small businesses. I know we do a lot of mailings in the state, and I'm sure you've been on the receiving end of mailers time after time from your elected officials or those that want to be your elected officials. I think we need more community forums. I think we need situations like where we're tonight. And I said early on in this campaign that I would use the library system to create community dialogue. We have great libraries through our system. In fact, in Rondequoit, part of our district, we have a brand new library. And I want to see people come together. I don't want to see mailers. I mean, mailers are necessary, but I want to see people come together to see understand what's available and it's not available. What funding do we need to bring to the table to meet the demands where our critical needs lie?
Thank you. For the last question before we go to the audience questions, it's about Earned Income Tax Credit. The Earned Income Tax Credit, or EITC, has been shown to increase family resources, promote employment, and lead to better outcomes for children. New York provides its own EITC in addition to the federal credit, payable in a lump sum once a year. Other states' experiences have demonstrated that EITC is more effective when it's distributed on a monthly basis instead of in a lump sum. If elected, Would you support consideration of changes to the EITC program to increase its impact on families and children? And Mr. Grady?
I would definitely support more frequent providing of the credit. I think you have family budgets. One thing I'll raise, and we haven't discussed it, when property taxes come into play here, I'm talking to many families at the doorsteps again. Ryan McQuaid just went through a reassessment, and I'm hearing both from seniors and families essentially close to the poverty line now, because as taxes go up, the resources go down, and the available amount of income goes down. And anything that we can do to provide a credit for people that are most in need in our community, we better be doing it. And if we need to do it on a more frequent basis, then let's do it. Because property taxes, medical insurance, obviously are continuing to skyrocket. And any credit that is based on need, again, not people who don't need it, but people who actually need it, we need to put forth a better effort in getting more frequent tax credits if that's what they present as a need.
Thank you. Ms. Romeo?
I would agree. I think we should consider looking at trying to stretch out that payment to families. I would say, though, we've seen, whether it's the STAR rebate program or others, I think the state would also need to be very conscious of the way we implement a program like that. We don't need to create another paper check that every family is going to receive with potentially certain names that are on the checks that are sent to people. I think it's more important that those resources get to the families. And I think that I would definitely support that. We'll want to make sure it's done in a cost-effective way and one that gets directly to families.
Thank you both very much. We've received a few questions from the audience. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make one of these out, so I might need some help. I'll start with the shortest one. Medicare for all. Your thoughts? Ms. Romeo first, please.
Well, I do support the New York program, which would create the single-payer system in New York City. Obviously, Medicare for All is a federal program, obviously Medicare being the federal program. But I do think that we have to be, again, taking a comprehensive look at health care, because particularly for New York State, we passed the New York Health Act. If the federal government does not play with us and does not provide us those federal waivers, there's a real likelihood that we will not be in a position that we can implement that program. And I think we also have to be looking at other ways that we can fill that gap while we obviously wait till another election. I don't think we should just sit on our hands and wait for a changing of political tides to try to pass that same bill. I think that healthcare is a human right, and it's more important to make sure we're finding ways that people can get served. Hopefully we'll see things change at our federal level as well as our state and local government. We'll be able to pass and be able to work towards universal coverage for everyone. But I do think that the next 2 years is going to be very important, if not the most important 2 years that our state and our nation are going to face. And unfortunately, right now, the federal government is distracted, and they're going to be distracted, unfortunately, for some time. The state really is going to need to step up and take on a lot of these issues. And I think at the end of the day, Medicare for all, I think we all agree that everybody needs to have health care. We need to make sure that that is the goal we're trying to achieve.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we're not getting a lot of different viewpoints. I also support the New York Health Act. However, I say we need to get it done as soon as possible. No excuses, no matter what the federal government is doing or saying. We need to get universal health care for all our citizens. It's been, again, I use the expression very often, it's been too long, but this is another one that's been too long on. Certainly other countries have found a way to do this. There's no excuses why New York, the Empire State, cannot get this done. Again, I go back to property taxes, I just mentioned it earlier, and all the increasing costs that family budgets are facing. Healthcare can no longer be sustained at double-digit increases. A lot of the problems that we face are due to our insurers, as we know. Excellus being a prime example of a company that goes into this every year for double-digit increases. And we, for far too long, have let this happen. And I think we really need to find a way, as Jamie said, it is a human right. Healthcare cannot be treated any longer in our state, in our country, as the way it is. It's too vital to us as human beings, and for people that understand when you're not working for an employer anymore, or employers are cutting back on the insurance that they provide, it's a very difficult facing situation for a lot of people. and we can no longer let it go unattended to.
Thank you. The response to many of the questions raised today involved an increase in funding. Given the high level of tax rates in New York State, one, how will you convince your counterparts in government to vote for increased funding? Or two, what would you suggest should have decreased funding to offset increases for the items discussed today? Mr. Grady.
I think we need to take a look at how we spend our economic development dollars. We have huge amounts of sums of money going out for tourism. And certainly I'm not against creating jobs. As I mentioned earlier, I said that was our #1 fighter against poverty. However, we need to look at all areas of how we spend our money. We've had many, I would call them pet projects in our community, unfortunately, that have gone the way of the dinosaurs, meaning they're no longer in existence. I'll point to the Fast Ferry that received a significant amount of money. We're now looking at a soccer stadium that is going to be empty. And I believe the number is $20 million that Mr. Gant advocated on behalf of that stadium being put where it is. Many people argue that it should be put in a different place. #1 problem now is that the city is in a fight with the owners of the soccer team, and the soccer team owners simply said, we're leaving. Good luck. And I think we really need to come together as a community. We are allocating resources. We have taxpayer money going in every year. And I think we need to really, as a community, come together and prioritize where we want our money to be spent. I'm hearing a lot of discussion tonight on social services. And if we feel as a community we come together that our money should be being spent in social services, then that needs to be the #1 priority. And then we need to take money from economic development and reduce it. And we know that the money that our economic development dollars are going out, the jobs aren't coming back equally.
Thank you. Ms. Romeo?
Well, I think that there's going to be several places in the state budget that we're going to be able to find resources with, but I think that we also have to look at some of the revenues coming into the state. I think that there are ways either through looking at a true millionaire's tax, or looking at some of the top percent that are not being taxed equally with the rest of New Yorkers, or looking at capital gains. There's other ways that we can bring in some additional revenue in without having to. We need to also look at other ways to bring revenue in, and not just taxing the average working families, but a lot of people that are making money, not making money, that are making money. And I do think that every program we have to be able to look at economic development. A lot of different programs are going to have to go through different funding cuts and different things like that. But there is a significant amount of money we could raise, particularly if we look at the gains made on capital and wealth. And I think that we do need to give some careful consideration about that as well.
Would either of you care to speak to the first part of the question about how you would convince your counterparts?
Well, with that, I think that, hopefully we will have a Democratic New York State Senate, and a true Democratic New York State Senate, where they're all working together. And I think that there's been a lot of issues that have been stalled over the last few years. Unfortunately, having been chief of staff in the state Senate a few years, I got firsthand view of some of those. That I think that we'd have much better partners in government if we were able to have both sides of the aisle. We do have some good local lawmakers on the Republican side of the aisle that we've been able to work with. But on a lot of these big ticket issues, we've not seen any progress made. But I do think that would be something that would be a very big step forward. And I know we've seen the governor in support of trying to flip the Senate, and a number of other local officials here as well. So we'll have to wait and see what Albany looks like in the makeup of it next year.
Mr. Grady?
When I say we need to use the John McCain formula, I think we need to collaborate, we need to come together, we need to stop fighting. Too much corruption, too much infighting. Albany needs a makeover. I'm a change agent, and I plan to call him into the office, get it done, and work with our delegation. Our delegation, by the way, are both Republicans and Democrats, and we should all be working together, again, for priority projects in our community. Whatever we define as being our greatest areas of need, we need to collaborate, come together, and decide what those are, and put our resources toward those projects, because there are only a limited number of resources to go around, as we know.
Thank you. There is a concern in the city about affordable housing. The city leaders appear to be promoting high-income housing in the city inner circle only. What will you do to close the gap and promote low-income affordable housing throughout the city? Mr. Grady?
Well, I think that many of you may know that we're redefining what affordable housing is right now in our city. That's the first formula to understand where the need is and what the number is. I can tell you I live in the Broncroft neighborhood. I live in the city. I live near North Winton. I understand the greatest need. People want to stay in downtown. They want to stay in the city. They want to move, but they can't get anything under $500,000. That's not acceptable. We need to find a way to bring in developers who will hit the mid-grade or the low-income housing and not let them build high-rise condos that very few of the population can afford. I know we're trying to attract young millennials, but even for them, those are steep prices to pay, whether it's rent or for own. And I think we just need to demand it. And I think that goes back to our mayor, and it goes back to our city council understanding. And I can tell you, being at the door, we talked about a lot of issues tonight, but I would put that in the top 4 when I'm in the city of affordable housing for people that are in the city currently and want to stay in the city. We can't force them into the suburbs. They've been in the city for too long.
Thank you. Ms. Romeo?
I think for the state, we would need to make sure that we are adding, if it's not already there, which I assume it is, but it probably needs to get prioritized, where the state is coming in, either through the Economic Development Council or the other grant programs, that affordable housing and what we define affordable housing needs to be a prominent part of that conversation. But I think when we're also looking at where state investments go, we also need to make sure we're paying attention to when we are investing into a community, that we're not investing into it in a way that's going to displace an existing community. I think that there's kind of 2 parts of that project, or that issue as well. We have to make sure we're really making very smart investments through our economic development councils. And I think it's important that we've had stakeholders, local stakeholders involved in that process for a long time. And I think it's going to make in the future, we need to make sure that we do have strong, prominent local voices prior to the investment decisions that are getting made by the local economic development councils.
Thank you. Please suggest 2 or 3 things / initiatives that you would suggest as a legislator to help reduce the impact of concentrated poverty on educational outcomes in our area schools. Ms. Romeo?
I think one thing our public school systems can do a little bit more is look at not just the college track for students when they're getting towards high school, or even, maybe when they're even in middle school, because we have a lot of great apprenticeship programs. We have a lot of middle skill jobs in the Monroe County area that haven't been filled yet. There's a lot of training and job tracks that we can steer kids towards. There's not necessarily a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree. And I think that we should be doing a lot more to try to engage earlier on in around junior high school with kids about that, and try to get them on successful paths where they're able to come out of school, potentially high school, and earn a living wage and be able to support themselves and their family. I think there's more that we can do, particularly when we're looking at what performance measures we're giving to public school districts. We need to make sure that it's not just the Regents diploma and college attendance, but we're trying to expand that a little bit. And obviously, I do think the earlier conversation we had regarding some community schools and bringing more services into schools to help families overall, I think is going to be very important. We know that schools can kind of be a nonstop shop for families that are coming in, and they're there because they want to get the best future for their child. But we can use that point of entry, point of access with families often to try to help steer them in other directions. And I think that that could be another family approach we could look at as well.
Thank you. Mr. Grady?
As I mentioned earlier, I'm in the home building business. I work for a home builder. I can tell you our trades, we don't have enough tradespeople. And I think we need to find a way to let our younger people know that there are really good paying jobs in the trades, whether it be a carpenter or a plumber or a framer. We can't get enough framers right now to build the housing that's in demand. And I think it's connecting business people again with our schools and educating the community to understand that there are people that need help. And these are young people who are open to training, and I think we need to make a match to bring together both sides so we can fill the jobs and reduce the poverty that we're seeing, because these are kind of good paying jobs right in our community.
Thank you. This is a very cooperative group, Your questions are coming to an end, just about on time. The candidates have kept to their time limits. You're really pretty good. Let's see, I did ask to have a question rewritten that I could not read. It was too, can't make it out? Okay. Well, in that case, we have come to the end of our question period. And since Ms. Romeo started with the opening remarks, I'm going to ask Mr. Grady to give his 1-minute closing statement, followed by Ms. Romeo.
Thank you. Again, thank you for this opportunity to present and sit and answer questions. We've been in, and Jamie, I'm sure will attest to this, race since the beginning, actually in June with the petitioning process. And I think that we brought a lot of attention to a seat that's been held by the same person for 27 years. We've done our best to educate the voters as to what the issues are. And certainly, again, we've answered questions here tonight. I think it's been somewhat of an arduous process, and people often wonder what it's like to be a candidate. I can tell you it's been invigorating, it's been fun, people have been very welcoming, and I just hope that we put forth our side. I think they're very close because we are Democrats, and we're all asking any Democrats in the room to go to the polls on Thursday and make this a good voter turnout. I think that's really important, and the educated voter really is, not to use a line from retail, but I'll say it's our best customer.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for being our moderator. Thank everybody for coming here tonight, and our sponsors of this forum as well. Running for offices, as I could say, is no easy task. It's a family commitment. So I know we're both very grateful to have our families on board with this process, as Jacqueline is as well. But I do think that right now, government, it's such an important time right now to make sure that our democracy and our government is really working again for the people. And again, it's difficult because the federal government is just in such a state of chaos right now that they're not governing, and governing is not their priority right now. They're just constantly putting out fires. And hopefully we will have a Congress come next year that tries to shift that focus back to government. But that's what's going to make state government right now for the next few years so important, because there are too many important things that our community and our state and our country can't continue to let slide by while we're letting the tweets and everything else go by. We really need somebody to get back in the room and get back to the job of government, and I'm hoping that's what I can help be a part of next year. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw you knock on the table. I'll knock on the roof for you. It's been my privilege to moderate this forum this evening. I want to thank the candidates again. This was really a very fast process, but we covered a lot of ground. So thank you for the audience for being here. And we're going to have Bridget Hurley from the Children's Agenda give some closing remarks. Thank you.
I'm actually going to repeat a lot of what was just said, which is to thank the candidates so much for coming out tonight. Thank the Junior League of Rochester for helping volunteer tonight, and the League of Women Voters for co-sponsoring with us. It was, I thought it really informative, so I appreciate all the thought that went into the questions. And don't forget to vote on Thursday. And we will have another forum on October 30th in preparation for the general election. So please mark your calendars, October 30th. Thanks very much.